Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Yevamos Daf Lamed Gimel. We begin on the top line of the Amid, where the Gemara continues the discussion which had started on the previous Daf on Amid Aleph. We had introduced a halacha that related to the case of the Mishnah regarding that if a person has this prohibition of the Yevama, he could be chayiv for both, according to Rabbi Eshes Ach and Aches Isha, because that's what she is, since there's no heter yibum, because of Isha, you have Eshes Ach and Aches Isha, and that the Gemara got into discussion regarding that machlekes Rabbi Yissi and Rabbi Shimon. What is it Rabbi Yissi holds? It would sound like that he holds that Isach Halalissa. Then we introduced a different brace. It sounds like he holds that Ein Isach Halalissa. So Rabbi Bo had said that Rabbi Yissi agrees by Issa Maisav when it's adding on. So the Gemara says, well, that's good for the case when it's adding on. What's for the case when it's not? That's going to be Isser Kail. So the Gemara actually ended up saying that it's a machlekes Tanoim in Rabbi Yissi if he holds Isach Halalissa by Isser Kail or only by Isser Maisav. And we're in the middle of discussing that, which we quoted a long discussion, a machlekes between Reb Chia and Bar Kapara in three different cases regarding if you can on one or two. And that's what the Gemara is right now in the crux of that, of explaining that what they're disagreeing about is in the opinion of Rabbi Yissi, if you say Isser Halalissa even by Isser Kail, not just by that of Isser Maisav. Should corresponds to any time today's daf. Some of these discussed in today's daf are in Isser Halalissa, that one Isser, if it's already prohibited, another one cannot take effect. But then there's something called Isser Maisav, which is when more people become prohibited to this prohibition. And Isser Kail, which is that it's the same person, but that more things become prohibited from this actual item. So like we said, Rabbi Yissi was of the opinion of Ein Isser Halalissa, and we proved that regarding by Eshes Ish with Chamaisai, which is that you're not going to be chayiv for both, with the exception of Issa Maisav, where more people are usher in one woman than we say Issa Chalalissa. However, Issa Kail, the Gemara is saying, where the same person is usher in more women, we say Ein Issa Chalalissa, but the Gemara ultimately concluded Beplukta. It's actually Machlekes Amiram in Be'Isser Kail B'Libid Rabbi Yissi. Rabbi Yissi holds, and that's what we're in the middle of discussing right now, that's the line we're going to start with, that Rabbi Chia holds in Rabbi Yissi, the Issa Kail is Mechayev Tarti, Issa Chalalissa, and that was all the three cases. The Gemara is going to explain them, that where you see that they are Isser Kail. Bar Kapara holds Rabbi Yissi holds only Chayav one, because Ein Isser Chalalissa would even be by that of Isser Kail. So that's where we begin the current Daf Yomi Gimel and Aleph. Says the Gemara b'may kamifligi. We quoted on the previous Daf three cases. Rabbi Chia and Bar Kapara were disagreeing if you can be chayav for one or for two. Says the Gemara, the disagreement is be'Isser Kail regarding when you have a Isser Kail. Gemara later on is going to explain what Isser Kail do you have in all these three cases. But again, this is the continuation of the Gemara. If Rabbi Yissi holds that even if Nasa Mace, Kaidim, meaning if you have the Eshes Ach take effect first, would you say that you can be chayiv two because when it becomes a Ches Isha, that's an Isser Kail, because now that same guy is being prohibited in more things, not more people becoming prohibited in that same thing. So that's the machlekes Valibid Rabbi Yissi, where Rabbi Yissi had said by other Isurim that you're going to be able to have Isser Chalal Isser if you have a Migui, which we said by Isser Maisav. The machlekes of Rabbi Makabar is, what about Isser Kail? Would Rabbi Yissi hold there also? Which again is Nasa Meis of Achkach Nasa Chai. If the dead brother, which created Eshes Ach first, and then Nasa Chai, and then there's Aches Isha, which is a case of Isser Kail, would we say that even over there it would take effect or not? So the Gemara explains. Chia held that you can be chayiv for two. He holds that Rabbi Yissi holds the Isser Kail Mechayev Tarti. By Isser Kail you can be chayiv two, because that was, if you, as Rashi points out, Rabbi Chia understands the starting discussion on the previous Daf on Amid Aleph, which said that you can be chayiv mishum Eshes Ach mishum Aches Isha. You can be chayiv for both, that it's his brother's wife and it's his wife's sister. That would seem to sound like even if Nasa Meis V'Achkach Nasa Chai. Even if the dead brother married first and then the living brother married his wife second, where you don't have an Isser Maisav in that second woman, rather you have an Isser Kail. That there's not more people becoming prohibited in this woman. It's the one who's forbidden is going to be forbidden for more things, which is with the other sisters. And since it becomes forbidden to other sisters, so it's going to include this woman who's already forbidden them as Eshes Ach, also as a Ches Isha. That's called the Isser Kail. So he understands the simple wording of Rabbi Yissi, Kipshutai. There would be old cases, which would even be in Isser Kail. But Bar Kapara held that no, you're only be liable only for one. So Rashi has to explain. So therefore, obviously, Bar Kapara is starting to understand when Rabbi Yissi holds you can be chayiv two is only when Nasa Chai Ba'achach Nasa Mes. when the Yavam had married his wife first, thus making the sister, the first prohibition she has is Achis Ishta, and then his dead brother married the sister, which that would be Isser Maisev, because you already had a Achis Ishta, then you have Eishasach, which it's forbidden on all the brothers, that woman. That's an Isser Maisev. And Rabbi increased by Isser Maisev. So specifically that case. Now Rashi's bothered. We taught in the Brisa that in that same Brisa, Rabbi Shimon disagreed, who is disagreeing with Rabbi. And he says, no, you only Mechayev. We had two Brisas of Rabbi Shimon. That's why we have to be Miyashim, depends which one got married first. Because he was in the Isach Alissa. So whichever one is the first one, that's going to be Mechayev. So one of the Brisas said, Rabbi Shimon says, no, you only Mechayev for Eishasach. Now we explained what's that case of Yigmichayim, only Ishach according to Rabbi Shimon, is Nasa Meis, Vachkach Nasachai. Because that's the first one. I thought you told me about Kapara, Rabbi Shimon's disagreeing with Rabbi Yisi. Rabbi Yisi says Yigmichayim for two. I thought Rabbi Yisi doesn't say it by Nasa Meis, Vachkach Nasachai. It's only by Nasachai, Vachkach Nasachai. You have Issa Meisim, not Issa Kail. So says Rashi that Brisa was Jebchia, L'Shitase. But you're right, Bakapar would never have taught such a Brisa, because according to him, you can't have Rabbi Yisi be Chayav two over there because that's the Issachar, and Rabbi Yisi doesn't hold you Chayav two Issachar, he only holds by Issachar. Now, says the Gemara in explaining, Umay Issachar Ikahacha. So wait a second. What type of Issachar do you have over here by the two cases of by all the three cases that Rabbi Yisi disagrees to say if you can Chayav two or one? How is it an Issachar? So the Gemara explains. Bishlam Azar, we understand regarding the first of the three cases was, let's say, a non-kohen. If he goes ahead and he does the avodah on Shabbos. So I understand Meikara before Shabbos, Shadi b'malacha v'asa b'avodah. He was permitted to do work, and he was forbidden to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Asava Shabbos. Now that it's Shabbos. So mitzvah b'malacha. Now that he becomes forbidden to do malacha because of Shabbos, so now he's not allowed to do any type of work. So mitzvah nami ba'avodah. So it becomes forbidden also to do the avodah, as Rashi explains, meaning it's a koil. The same person's forbidden in the same thing, but now it's including more things that are being prohibited to him, because not only the work on the Beis Hamikdash, but also all types of work is forbidden. As Rashi says, here you cannot say Issa Maisev, because not really expanding the Isser on other things, on other people, which would be the Avodah. Maisev would be, Rashi says, for example, let's say if you could say that Avodah originally was forbidden to non-Kahanim, it's permitted to Kahanim. Now that it's Shabbos, since the Isser is adding on to the Kahanim because of Shabbos, it's also being added on to this Zar because of Shabbos too. But the thing is, you can't say that because it's not true. Shabbos does not become forbidden to Kahanim. If it was, then you have to say Issa Maisev. But it's not. It's a what's it called? It's a Isser Kail. So that's a case that we would have this disagreement between Reb Chia and Bar Kapara of Zar b'Shabbos. That would be the case of case number one. Now, again, this all really just explained what we really did in the previous daf, showing how the three cases, which we had those slides yesterday, of the machlekes Reb Chia and Bar Kapara are all cases of Isser Kail. So to Balmun, we had a case of a blemished kohen who was doing the avodah in the state of Tumah. So before he became Tamei, so Balmum is Shor Bachila. He's permitted to eat from Kachin, like it says in the Pasuk Yirchav, even though he's blemish, he could eat from Kachin. But Basa Bavai does not do the actual service. Now that he becomes Tamei, so Migid de Komitza Bachila, since he's becoming forbidden to eat the Kachin, because if you're Tamei, you cannot eat the Kachin, so Mitzvah Nami also becomes Asa, meaning it also takes effect the name of Tumah Ba'avaida regarding the service, which is Isser Kail. There's not more people coming forbidden. The same person is being forbidden for different things. And that thing is forbidden for more things. That's Isser Kail. So again, we're showing you that the three cases they disagreed about is Isser Kail. And Chia holds, Rabbi Yisi holds that Isser Kail is Chayav Torah, and by Kabbalah is only one.
What are the more things by the Torah? Balmum can't do any of it.
But I'm saying, meaning that, like Rashi says, Chayil Nam Shem Toma Ala Avodah, meaning the those things of the Karbonos have the title of Tumah is taking effect on it regarding the Isra of eating. So now that his designation of Tumah is taking effect on this item as eating, so now it also takes effect regarding his avodah of the actual service itself. Meaning there's a title, his designation of Tumah is taking effect on this in another context. So he's being forbidden in more things. And Ella, but so now the Gemara comes to the third case. Malika, the Gemara says, we had a case of when the Kohen does Malika on the Chatas Oif, and the Zar goes ahead and he eats it, so that we had a machlekes regarding if you can be chayev one or two, meaning what would be the two liabilities. So one would be because of the two liabilities would be because of zaris, because you're non-kohen eating kachim, the Chatas Oif, and also because it's nevela. So the Gemara asks, well, that's possible to have it if it happens at the same time. You don't have it in Isser Koil, as Rashi explains. At the time of the Malika, both of them are taking effect. Because as long as you didn't do Malika, so you had an Isser of Me'ilah. And that's not the Isser of Zaris that we're talking about, the carbon which is permitted to eat by the Kahanim. So the moment you do Malika and it's permitted for the Kahanim, so it removes the prohibition of Me'ilah, and it takes effect the Isser of Zaris, which says Zar Yochel, and the Isser Malika, which Tosfos discusses, interesting discussion, when each one is taking effect. Maybe it's not the same exact moment, Tosfos shows that it is, but L'chaira, says the Gemara, you were trying to tell me that there's three cases that Reb Chia and Bar Kapar are disagreeing about. Is in Machlekes in Rabbi Yisi holds of Isser Kail. That was good for the first two cases. The third case is not an Isser Kail. If it's happening at the same time, the Isser. The moment you do the Malika is the moment that it's not Me'ilah anymore, because now it's permitted for the Kam to eat. It's when Zar Lo Yochel happens, and it's when it becomes Nevela. So how you tell me that's a case of Isser Kail? That's not a Isser Kail, it's a case of Isser Ba'as Achas. So the Gemara says, you're right. Ella, rather, Kimiflik Be'Isser Ba'as Achas. You're right, we're going to reinterpret all the three cases that we spoke about. They're disagreeing regarding when the Isser takes effect simultaneously at the same time. And Rabbi Yisi. And the Gemara explains now again. Rabbi Chia he holds Rabbi Yisi that Rabbi Yisi Be'Isser Ba'as Achas when it's a simultaneous Isser Mechayev Tarti. You can be liable for two. Meaning, as Rashi explains, this is Rabbi Yisi had previously said that you can be Chayev Shtayim, the case of Achos Ishta that's also Eshesach, is for example where the Isser Eshesach and Achos Ishta took effect at the same time. How could you have that? So for example, let's say that the two brothers made a shliach to Mekadosh two sisters, same shliach, and the two sisters made a shliach likabala for their kedushin, and their shliach made their shliach. So the Isser Eshesach and the Isser Achos Isha is boin ke'echad, is happening at the same time. It's b'vas achas. That is the case of Reb Chia holds of Rabbi Yisi, and therefore those are the three cases that they disagree about, because that's based on the principle of how you translate Rabbi Yisi. Reb Chia is holding Rabbi Yisi is b'vas achas, but the Bar Kapar Sava holds no. Lo mechayev l'chad Rabbi Yisi would only hold that you would only be chayev for one of these surim if it happens at the same time. So, as Rashi explains, that so what is the case that Rabbi Yisi holds you mechayev to? Is specifically by Isser Ma'asav, meaning he translates that case that Rabbi Yisi and Reb Shimon disagreed about on the previous daf, on the Aleph, is only if Nasa Chayv Achkech Nasa Meis, like we explained before. If the living brother married his wife first, which is the Isser of Achos Isha, and then the brother married his wife, which is the sister, it's the Eshach, that's the Isser Ma'asav, that's Rabbi Yisi's going to be Chayv Tarti. Shimon holds no, even there in the Sechalas. But again, that's the machlekes between Reb Chia and Bar Kapara in these three cases is based on the principle of Bavas Achas, which is based on how they disagree about what was the case of Rabbi Yisi on Amid Al. So the Gemara here also goes through the three cases and says, wait a second. What are these three cases that we have that you're going to show me that they're cases of happening at the same time? So the Gemara goes through. For case number one, Zar Shashimish B'Shabbos, regarding a non-Kohen that does the Avodah on Shabbos. So how is it B'Vas Achas? How is the Isser Shabbos and the Isser Zaras happening at the same time? We're talking about where this boy developed two pubic hairs today, B'Shabbos, on this Shabbos. Now, you cannot say now anymore like we had previously translated when we were trying to say it's Isser Koil. You can't say that, originally he was permitted in all types of work, but forbidden avodah, because not true. He didn't have any isser of avodah up until today because he was a cotton. He comes out that the Isra of being a non-Kohen and the Isra of Shabbos are happening at the same moment, because he became Bar Mitzvah today. But if he had brought 2 pubic hairs during the weekday, then you're right, of course, he would have the Isra Zaras as a non-Kohen, and there would be the Isra Shabbos. But it's Boin Ke'echad, that's the case that Rebbe Bar Kapar are disagreeing about. That's case number 1. Case number 2 is Balmum Nami, regarding someone, a Kohen who's blemished, who's doing the Avodah in the state of Tumah. So we're talking about going to AC, Shtei Sajas, V'Tami, like, we're talking about where he brings 2 pubic hairs and becomes Tamei. In other words, that he became Tamei before he brought 2 pubic hairs. And during his Tumah and his blemish is when he's bringing his 2 Cyrus, because like we're saying, he was already Tamei, and he's a blemish. He has some body part that's a disproportionate. So when he's becoming Bar Mitzvah, both are taking effect, because both of them are really waiting to happen. He's blemished and he's Tamei. So these 2 problems are happening at the same time. That's exactly the same machlekes Reb Chia and Bar Kapar. Or in another case, says the Gemara, you could say that he cut his finger, which is a blemish, the saket tmeya, with a tamei knife. So he became tamei from the cutting of that, which Tais says obviously has to be talking about that his finger was cut literally till the last drop, that when just the knife touched it, he became a tamei balmum. Because if a person's regularly cutting, like I did as a child, my father said, don't touch that knife, started cutting, and then before you knew it, half the thumb was off. But again, the moment it was touched would be the tumah. The actual balmum would only be when it comes off. So Taisa says it has to be that it was literally at the drop, and then the knife touched it and it fell off. So then it would be a case of boin ke'echad, of the tumah and the mum happening at the same time. So the Gemara says, okay. Says the Gemara, now that we explained what the machlekes was regarding, case number 3 we didn't have to say, because we just said before that was the only way of saying it was vasa'ach, because that made us change the whole thing. But says the Gemara like this. Remember, both Reb Chia and Bar Kapar, if you recall the story from the previous daf, they both swore, they jumped up and they swore, Havayda, kach shemati mi Rebbe. This is how I heard from Rebbe. There's only chayav 1. He said, no, I heard from Rebbe's chayav 2. So the Gemara 1's like this. The Gemara says, let's take this story apart. Bishlam Reb Chia, that he could explain his tradition that he heard from Rebbe, and he could also translate for you what Bar Kapar had heard. Why? He asked, and when Rebbe taught Lididei to him, Reb Chia has this, he heard from Rebbe, that he heard that you can be chayav 2. Yeah, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yasi. Because Rabbi Yasi, like we said, is more stringent in his interpretation of Issachar Alissa. And Kiyasni Bar Kapara, when did Rebbe teach the Bar Kapara? Was Aliba de Rebbe Shimon. So Bar Kapara had made a mistake. He thought that Rebbe taught it to him even according to Rabbi Yasi. But the truth is, it was like Rebbe Shimon. Rebbe Shimon is the one who holds Ein Issachar Alissa. So in Rebbe Shimon, Bar Kapara was correct. And therefore Reb Chia could explain what was it that he heard and what was it that really Bar Kapar heard. Just Bar Kapar made a mistake. And the Bar Kapar, but according to Bar Kapar, that he said that Rebbe told him according to Rabbi Yasi, that even according to Rabbi Yasi, we're going to be lenient and only going to be chayav for 1, which we're saying it's regarding the Isser Bas Achaz. So according to whom would Bar Kapar explain that Rebbe had taught Reb Chia stringently? As the Gemara says, what according to Bar Kapar, Reb Chia Shekur Meshaker? Reb Chia is lying? Because Rebbe did not teach him that according to Reb Yasi, give me chayav 2, because Bar Kapar is saying that it was in Reb Yasi that Rebbe had taught him that you can have only 1. So Reb Chia makes sense how he can explain what he holds and what Bar Kapar must have been told. But Bar Kapar made a mistake, because it was only according to Reb Shimon. But according to Bar Kapara, that's going in Reb Yasi, the Rebbe told him only 1, so according to whom, if even the Mohammedan Geshit, the Rebbe was telling him only have 1, so what was how's he going to explain what Reb Chia is saying? Reb Chia is lying? There's no room for even an error. For Bar Kapara, Reb Chia would explain it makes sense for the error, but how would you say the other way around? So the other rather says the Gemara, you're right, we're retracting on even who we're disagreeing in. If you recall from the previous daf, we were saying that Reb Chia and Bar Kapara were disagreeing in Reb Yasi in the Isser Kyle. Just before we fell off, and we said, no, they weren't disagreeing about Isser Kyle, because that wouldn't explain case number 3. They were disagreeing with Reb Yasi in the Isser B'vas Achas. Now we're falling off. You're right, it's in B'vas Achas, but it's not in Reb Yasi, because it wouldn't make sense then, because according to Bar Kapara, Reb Chia is lying. So rather, says the Gemara, they're actually disagreeing in Reb Shimon's opinion when the Isser happens at the same time. And Reb Chia was saying that even though Reb Shimon was on record on the Amud Aleph on the previous daf, that he holds by Isser Chal Isser you're going to be exempt, that's only in the case of Isser Koil, where it's Nasa Mace first and then Nasa Chai. But if the Isser happens at the same time simultaneously, actually he would agree, because since no Isser is coming before the other one, so they're both going to take effect. Bar Kapara said that no, Reb Shimon disagrees, even Bevas Achas that you only Michayv one. That is what the machlekes was between Reb Chia and Bar Kapara. In Reb Shimon, even though he's usually on record of Ein Isser Chal Isser, that's because of Isser Ma'aser, Isser Koil, but Isser Bas, which Tais discusses, seems to be opposite Svaras. But Isser Bas Achas, it's happening at the same time, like Rashi says, so which one should push away the other one? They're both going to take effect according to Reb Chia, according to Bar Kapara, it's going to be only one. So the Gemara still has a problem with this, because Bishloima Reb Chia, we understand according to Reb Chia, Komishta what's he swearing? Why is he getting up and swearing? You don't just swear. It's Lafuka Reb Shimon Mechezkel. It's coming to exclude Reb Shimon from his established position, meaning we know Reb Shimon was established as a lenient opinion that held Ein Isser Chal Isser. And Reb Chia is swearing that no, you can be chayiv as long as it happened at the same time, you can be chayiv for two. Why is he getting up and swearing? His opinion in Reb Shimon that you can chayiv only one is the opinion that we always establish that Reb Shimon holds Ein Isser Chal Isser only chayiv one. He doesn't get up and swear. But you are the more established opinion. Reb Chia makes sense this way. Why is Bar Kapara this way? Says more kasha. That's a difficulty. That's not a tiyufta, but definitely that's a difficulty. But says another difficulty is that Bishlam and Bar Kapara, according to Bar Kapara, now it's the inverse of what we said before. When we thought they were disagreeing with Vas Achas according to Rabbi Yisi, now that they're saying they're disagreeing with Vas Achas according to Rabbi Shimon, the Gemara asks it the other way. Bishlam Bar Kapara, that he could explain how his tradition was and how Reb Chia's teaching was, and he could say, when did Rabbi teach him that you can be potter according to Rabbi Shimon of even Bevas Achas, they only Michayv one, not two? Was Libre Rabbi Shimon? It was according to Rabbi Shimon. Ki asked Rabbi Chia, when Rabbi had taught to Rabbi Chia that you can be chayiv two, Rabbi Chia made a mistake, because that wasn't in Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi actually had taught him Libre Rabbi Yasi. Rabbi Chia made a mistake. He thought it was according to Rabbi Shimon that Rabbi had taught him. So according to Bar Kapara, we can understand his opinion and how he's going to explain what was the mistake of Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia, according to Rabbi Chia, that he says that according to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi's teaching you can be chayiv two. So when Bar Kapara has a version that you can be potter from two, according to whom was he saying that? According to Rabbi Chia, Bar Kapara Shakur Meshaker, Bar Kapara is lying because Rabbi didn't teach anyone potter and only chayiv one. Everything only chayiv two, because even Rabbi Shimon he holds his version of chayiv two for sure. So for sure, Rabbi Yasi is always the more machmer. So according to whom is it? So the Gemara has an interesting answer, a little bit complex. Says the Gemara, Amalach Rabbi Chia would tell you that like this. Most definitely Bar Kapara is not lying. That he made a mistake. That, yes, Rabbi did say a case that you're going to be what's called potter, meaning only chayiv one, and you're not going to have Isser Chal Isser, but it wasn't in all the cases that Rabbi had taught it him. Rather, Ki asnei Rabbi l'didei, when Rabbi taught the Bar Kapara that you're going to be chayiv only one, Tarti lifter asnei. He only taught him two cases that you're going to be chayiv only one. What are the two cases? If a zar does avoid on Shabbos, which was case number one we had from the previous daf, and if a balmum does avoid in the state of tumah, which was case number two. Which, as we had mentioned previously, if you recall from today's daf, those two cases are applicable in both a case of Isser Koil, you could have it, and there could also be a case of Isser Vas Achas. Right? Remember, as we were trying to say, we thought they were disagreeing with Isser Koil, then we fell off because those two cases could be Isser Koil. But the third case couldn't be that Isser Vas Achas, so we fell off of it being Isser Koil. We said it's Isser Vas Achas, then we fell off of being Rabbi Yisi, went to Rabbi Shimon. But now a new cheshbon. Rabbi Chia is saying when Rabbi had taught Bar Kapara that there were two cases he taught him that you can be chayiv only one, which were these first two cases. Now it's getintam and based. Variable number two. There's three steps really to this, what Rabbi Chia is trying to say. The Isser Koil last name. Now, he taught it him regarding only Isser Koil. In other words, when those two cases happened through Isser Koil, as we had originally explained, we showed you how that could be that you were first chayiv, you were first asur in avodah, then when it comes along Shabbos, you're asur in omalacha, and then that's the same thing is being forbidden to you, but for other things that's called Isser Koil. So in those cases of Isser Koil, and variable number three, Ba'aliba de Reb Shimon, and according to Reb Shimon, That's where Rebbe had taught Bar Kapara that you're going to be chayav only one. But if let's say it would happen b'vasachas, no, then Rebbe would hold you can be chayav. And moreover, but the third case of Malika, Rebbe didn't teach him ever that you can be pater, because as we explained on Amid Aleph, you could only have that case of, you don't have it by koil, you only have b'vasachas, because the moment you do the Malika is zar lo yechaboy, and the Isser of Nevela. And there says Rabbi Shimon would agree that you be chayiv too. Because remember that was his version of Rebbe teaching him that even according to Rabbi Shimon, when it's Isser of Asachas, you can be chayiv too. Now, but as the Gemara continues, the Chazil Kapara, like Bar Kapara, however, saw, Lazar Sha'ach Malika, the third case, which Rebbe did not teach him, according to Bar Kapara, seemed similar. Because it's also a case of kachim, like the other first two cases, that you'd be doing one thing that you'd be chayiv too. So, but I did the Damila, since according to Bar Kapara, this seems similar, Arva Bahadayu. He put it together to be potter. Now, when he mixed it together, he didn't realize that third case, you can't have an Issachar. So, now, the Ayinba, now at a later point in time, when he was going through his Brises, his Mishnayos that Rebbe had taught him, so he learned them all three together. Now, the problem is, Ashkach, he couldn't find to explain the cases, because if you remember, Zar Shachar Malika is only possible when it happens at the same time. Now he forgot that he mixed it together when the Rebbe never taught him that case. And come on, this is Al-Bazach, so he wrote in his notes that this is also. Now, V'savar, he thought that Rebbe taught it to him, that it's going to be Potter. So he said, Midahaba Vasachas, obviously case number 3 of Malika is only possible happens at the same time. So Hanama Vasachas, that means the first two cases are also happening at the same time. Ooh, Midahanach Lifter. Now, for the fact that the case of Malika is that you're going to be Potter when it happens in Vasachas, Hanachnami Lifter. Those first two cases are also going to be Potter when Bevasachas. And, says Reb Chia, that was the mistake of Bar Kapara. He wasn't lying, it was a mistake. The mistake he made was that he thought that it's in the 3 cases, when Rebbe had only taught him 2 cases, and Rebbe only taught it him in Issachar. That Rebbe Chia holds that in the Issachar listen, not by Basachas, but he put together case number 3, which is only possible Basachas, and therefore he thought must be Basachas. That's how Rebbe Chia is going to explain. According to Bar Kapara, well, it was his mistake. We already said how Bar Kapara explained Rebbe Chia's mistake, but again, the machlekes was Issa Basachas according to Rebbe Shimon. Again, nothing to do with, as we started off the discussion on the previous stuff that we thought we were going to show you a machlekes of Issa Koil according to Rebbe Yesi as a machlekes at 9. We didn't end up showing you that. And as Taisa says, that Rebbe Yesi holds Chayiv Shtayim on Issa Meiser Issa Koil Basachas. Rebbe Shimon holds Chayiv 1 Issa Meiser Issa Koil, and the only case you can Chayiv Shtayim according to Rebbe Chia is by that of the Basachas. Now the Gemara asks Meisevei from the following brisa on Bar Kapara. Remember, according to Bar Kapara, Rebbe Shimon holds that b'vavas achas you're still only going to be chayav 1. So the brisa says zar sheshimish b'Shabbos if a non-kohen does the avodah on Shabbos, or case number 2 that we had u'ba'amum sheshimish b'tumah, or if a ba'amum does the avodah instead of tumah. So then it says the brisa yishka mishum zagas u'mishum Shabbos. You can be chayav for being a zar and because you're doing malach on Shabbos, and also the case number 2 mishum ba'amum mishum tumah for being a ba'amum and for doing instead of tumah. That's Rebbe Yesi. That's Reb Shimon, as we already know this machlekes. In kanal mishum zar ba'amum b'vad. Says no, you only have the first isra of zar and that of ba'amum. Now, what's interesting, says the Gemara, is v'ilu malika shayra. But the third case of malika is being left out over here in the brisa, says the Gemara, l'man shayra. In other words, for whom of these 2 tanoim agree to the other side, that we don't have to mention it to say that this is the machlekes in the third case too. As the Gemara explains. Elam Rabbi Yesi, everything is contrary to Rabbi Yesi that he agrees in this case to his dispute with Rabbi Shimon. How could you say that? Hash Rabbi Yesi, if Rabbi Yesi holds the Isser Kail, where one of them comes first, still Rabbi Yesi says the latter one is going to take effect in Mechayev Shtam and Mechayev 2. So B'Vesa B'Asach and Boy, do we have to say that it's happening simultaneously? For sure, the second one's going to take effect. It's not even second. So you can't say he agrees in the case of Malika, which is Isra B'Asach, as Mechayev only 1. For sure, Rabbi Yesi is going to hold Mechayev 2. Allah, brother, says, obviously it's Rabbi Shimon. That Rabbi Shimon is agreeing by the case of Malika that you can be chayiv 2. Oh, so obviously this that he disagreed in the first 2 cases was only when it's an Isser Kail. because ubesa koilu the pater. When does Reb Shimon hold you can be pater? Is when it's Isser Koil. Abisa Vasachas, but when it's Isser Vasachas, like the case of Malika, then Mechayiv you would be Chayiv too. Says the Gemara, Tiyuvta Bar Kapara, Tiyuvta, there's a reputation of Bar Kapara. Clearly you see that by the case of Isser Vasachas, Reb Shimon would agree that you can be Mechayiv of two, and not like Bar Kapara said, but even Reb Shimon, Vasachas is going to hold you can be Mechayiv only one. Now the Gemara goes back to explain the case of the Brisa. We had mentioned that Zar Shashimish b'Shabbos. If the non-kohen does the avodah in Shabbos, so we have this machlekes mechayiv 2 or mechayiv 1. That was the machlekes between the two of them. But says the Gemara, what's this avodah that the Zar is doing on Shabbos? If he's slaughtering the animal, shchita b'zag she'er. Actually, maybe he'd be chayiv for chil Shabbos because he's not supposed to do the avodah as a Zar. But there's no Zaris because a non-kohen is allowed to do the shchita. And if it's regarding receiving the blood and transporting the blood, that's just muktzah. And that's not an isser deraisa of Shabbos to say michayiv for Shabbos. And ibak tara, and if it's burning the emurim, the sacrificial parts, so then the difficulty is Rabbi Yisi. You're telling me Rabbi Yisi holds that you can michayiv a korban chatas for Shabbos. No, and that's what the Gemara assumes, that we're telling you can mechayiv shtayim according to Bar Kapar, according to Reb Chia. That means you can mechayiv chatas. But Vam Rabbi Yisi himself, this in Rabbi Yisi our whole discussion. Rabbi Yisi himself in the first parak says Havara, the malacha of burning a fire on Shabbos, l'lav yitzasa. There's a special pasuk in the Torah. The lamatas malacha is not mentioned in the Torah. We're learning out from a hekesh to the building of the Mishkan. One malacha, it says explicitly, it says lisavaru eish b'chomish v'seichem. Don't kindle a fire. Why was it singled out? So it's a machlekes. Rabbi Yisi holds because to tell you that it's actually not going to be a chiyuv misa. It's only going to have a negative prohibition. So how could you say michayiv achatas if it's only a negative prohibition and it's not that of a chiyuv kares which has a chatas? So Rav Acha Yaakov says it's b'shchitas parei shel kohen gadol. It's actually talking about the slaughtering of the bull of the kohen gadol. I mean, Tosfos explains just whatever. What didn't havar l'lav? So what's the problem? We're not doing lavin. Tosfos says that regarding what would be, when would we say iser koil according to Rabbi Yisi would be specifically certain types. It wouldn't be just a lav. That was the Gemara's question. But so the Gemara answers, you're right. We're talking about a special type of a slaughtering. It's slaughtering the bull of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, where shchita is a av malacha, and there is a problem about zaras. Why? I thought a zar could do the shchita, but it's kedibri. It's going like the one that says in Yoma Daf Mem Beis Mem Aleph, shchita is parish al kohen gadol bezar psula. That to anyone else to slaughter the bull of the kohen gadol is going to be invalid because the kohen gadol has to do it. So therefore, yes, the shchita of the zar on Shabbos is by the power of the kohen gadol. Says, if that's the case, my zar, then why picking a zar? I feel like kohen had dinami, even a regular kohen. Because Rashi explains, the one who says it's going to be invalid learns it out because it says Aaron b'chulka. And it says hikra Aaron, and it says at the end of the parsha l'chok olam. Wherever it says chulka means ma'akev, obviously has to be specific with Aaron. So why picking a zar? It's even by a non-kohen. So you're right. Shazar etzla kama. When we say zar, it doesn't mean the non-kohen. It means whoever is foreign to this, which is even the kohen hedge. Or another answer, which the Gemara is saying in form of a question, it's really asking on the questioner. Masculine Ravashi says, and actually it's a different interpretation, we'll show you how to explain this, but the simple understanding is, Midi chatois ketani, did we say anything about being chayv achatas? Or lavi ketani, did we say anything about negative prohibition? We just said regarding an isser, and that you're going to have, even though havar lalav yatzasa, it's, again, there's different interpretations to Zishanim, what exactly is it going on, Kabbalah and Halacha, is it going on with the havara, whichever one it is, but the Gemara is saying it's not a difficulty that you're not going to be chayiv. We're not saying you have to be chayiv. We're just saying that that's going to be an isser, and that is most definitely going to be in any one of these cases, whether it's tilta ba'almo, whether it's going to be the lulav yotzasa, either one, it's going to be asr. It's not necessarily be chayiv. So the Gemara says, so then, if you're not chayiv on a second liability for the second isser, so then what's the difference of saying that if it's 2 or 1? So the Gemara, we said this in the previous stuff, like covered ben Yisham Gemur. To bury him amongst the totally wicked people, which is that if we are considering as if you did 2 Isurim, we're going to bury you amongst the very wicked, even though you're right, we're not going to make any liability for the second Isser of whichever one it is for the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. The next Mishnah, continue with this theme about the two brothers marrying to two sisters. Says the Mishnah, this is not two brothers, but this is Shnaim, two men, Shekitcher Tei Nashim, that they got engaged to two women. Now, B'shas K'neisas L'chuppah, now at the time when they're coming to the chasna, to the chuppah, they're doing a double wedding. Hechlifa eshel zeh lezeh, ve'eshel zeh lezeh. So what they do is they swap wives. At the last second, they're like, okay, we're not doing this, and Reuben takes Leah, and Shimon takes Rachel. So halacha is harei l'chayav mishum eishes ish. So the obvious mechayiv, because once you do kiddushin already, which is before chuppah, they already considered married women, even though they weren't permitted to them yet because they didn't have the student, but they're eishes ish. So you mechayiv for eishes ish. Now, let's say this Reuben and Shimon were brothers. Mechayiv also for the brother's wife. If these two women were sisters, then you mechayiv also mishum isha l'chaysa, but the issue of taking a woman's sister. And if they were also chuppahs nida, the woman was also in the state of menstruation, then mechayiv also for a menstruating woman. Now, Morva says the Mishnah, after such a story, so after the first night that they were together, you would have to separate the women for 3 months. They cannot come back to their real husbands yet. Because maybe from the chasna night that the women became pregnant and their children are mamzerim, because it's some other man's wife, and you need to differentiate between what's called kosher seed and invalid seed, so that the children that are born should not say that he's from the original husband, which is really the second one she ends up going to, and not to the first one. We have to know if this child's a mamzer or not. But says the Mishnah, but let's say they were minors, young girls that not fit for childbearing age yet, then they could go back right away. Obviously, we have no concern about pregnancy. Shmuel is going to explain exactly what does this mean. It sounds like a daughter of a kohen, but really it's really supposed to mean the wives of Kahanim. If they were kahanas, these women, then nifslim in the truma, they become invalid from truma. Some have the gear so that from kahuna. We'll see right in the Gemara what exactly does this halacha mean. But first, the Gemara opens up and says that, are you serious? Hechlifu? It means that these two men swapped these women. Maybe the Gemara has 3 problems with this. First of all, you think we're talking about wicked people? We don't usually speak about cases of wicked people that they just swap another person's wife by the chuppah. Pursue, moreover, Hadatan Rabbi taught in the Brayso regarding our Mishnah, there's going to be 16 carbon chatois brought for this story. Why? Each one of the 2 men are bringing 4 chatois, as we went through in the Mishnah. So it's going to be because of Eishes Ish, Eishes Ach, Achais Isha, and Nida. So that's each guy is going to have 4 chatois, that's 8. And also the women have the Isurim, because women also have a Nichus on Nafashas Isis for doing these 4 Isurim. So it's going to be 4 times 4, it's going to be 16 chatois. Now the problem is, even Mazid, if the story was deliberate, if they're pulling some crazy deviant prank, that they're switching at the time of the chasna, Mikro carbon, there's no carbon. Carbon's only B'shogeg, it's amazing. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Today hochlafu. So you're right, it doesn't mean hichlifu, that they swap, but they became swap. It was a mistake. You had this, the dechtichel, and no one saw anything, and they didn't notice it was dark wedding hall, and then they went, and then they didn't realize, then they got swapped. So that was the case. It says it's logical to say like this, because the end of the Mishnah says, if they were young girls and not fit for childbearing age yet, then the next day already could come back and you can finish Sheva Brachas together, you can go right back. Now, says the Gemara, if you would think that the story happened deliberately, Misharia, even if she was a minor, you think she'd be permitted to go back to the husband at all? But she's a saita. They did a deliberate extramarital relationship, which makes her forbidden to the Baal and to the Boil. So, obviously, that it's talking about that it was done by mistake. Which the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. Because Holei Kash, that wouldn't be difficult. Because Peter Katana, when the minor is seduced, it's actually einis ninu. It's actually considered as rape. It's actually considered as forcible. Because a child doesn't have, and that's why we have all these laws, because a child, don't tell me she has consent, she's not old enough to understand. It's still being forced. And when the wife of Yisrael is violated, she actually permitted her husband. That she was not forced, and then she's forbidden to the husband. Sounds like if she was forced, then she'd be permitted. So Elareda says the Gemara, no, the proof is the Ketani, because we learned the Mishnah said, we separate them from their true husbands 3 months, because maybe they were pregnant. Now the inference is halav mubaris, but if they were not pregnant, or as Rashi points out, after 3 months, sharyan, then they're permitted, even though they were adults. Now, if it was deliberate, do you think it would be permitted? Obviously, the case we're talking about is that they were swapped, which was b'shagi, not hechlifu, not that they were deliberate. Thank you to any time for those things.